I mean, that seems like a great question for the lawyers to debate. I mean, are you allowed to actually, I mean, I would imagine there's some people that would, some people amongst the legal community that would object quite strongly at the idea of banning how a business presents their decision sets. And yet others might say, well, you don't want to have businesses presenting things that could take advantage of innocent customers, right?
Look, the last 15 years of certain areas of psychology could be described as the development of an understanding that people don't know what's good for them. Now, we've probably always known it. We've known it with a certain kind of sophistication that we didn't have before. So when you know that people don't know what's good for them, what do you do about it? And it seems to me that the right answer to that question is it depends. Because one of the things that people don't know that's good for them is they don't know that having their freedom of choice limited is good for them. So people are going to rebel against any effort to restrict options because it makes you better off. So you have to pick your battles, it seems to me. It's a disaster for people not to put money away for retirement. And so that's a place where intervention is called for, and even then it should be as light-handed an intervention as possible, like changing the default, which seems to do a great job all by itself. Paying an extra $1,000 for a car, that seems to me to be small beer. And these decisions get made sort of partly by looking at what else is on the table and what the potential consequences are of having people consistently making bad decisions. I don't know how else to do it, because choice is, there's no question that choice is good. People can't live fully human lives without choice. So you got to be careful about where you restrict. That's at least the way I would answer that question.
Stephen, let me get a question from you. Or a comment, whichever you like.
Excuse me?
Question or a comment, whichever you like.
To be honest, it's two comments, but they are carefully chosen because this was an extremely rich panel, and I've got a number of comments, but in the interests of efficiency, I will limit them to a comment on Sheena Iyengar's presentation, one on Barry's. As you were speaking, Sheena, about choice, it reminded me of a book which had a great influence on me by Takeo Doi. I don't know if that name rings any bell in this room or not. It should. Takeo Doi is a Japanese psychoanalyst, actually.
Oh, you mean the one on Wa?
On what?
Was it on Wa?
No.
That's Wa? No.
No. The book is called The Anatomy, in English, and I don't read Japanese, The Anatomy of Dependence. Dependence translates a Japanese word which is untranslatable. Amai. I may be probably pronouncing it incorrectly. But amai is a dependence of the kind that a child has on a parent. So it's dependence has largely negative connotations in English, in our culture, certainly for grown men. But in Japanese culture, it has the connotation of being taken care of and loved, and that's part of the dependence. If there are Japanese in the audience, I hope you will amplify or correct me. What's interesting about this, for our purposes, is that when Doi motivates his book, he tells of his experience in the United States as a young graduate student shortly after World War II. Came here not knowing a lot of English, very uncomfortable in this very alien culture, very uncomfortable particularly with all the choices he had to make. Mm-hmm. And he tells this very amusing story about being invited to his professor's home for dinner. He's doubly uneasy because he's with his professor and he's got to, participate in a way that he has no training for, and it's different from being in the classroom or in the office. He's greeted at the door with one meaningless choice after another. Would you like scotch or bourbon? Would you like it straight up or on the rocks? He says, I couldn't have cared less. I just wanted to be taken care of. Then to top it all off, he served a dinner, and instead of deprecating it in proper Japanese style And instead of offering lots of choice, as is done in proper Japanese style, he's sat down, and this dates it, of course, because the professor's wife is not a professor, but a housewife. And she's worked, she says, all afternoon on this dinner. The clear implication being you better eat it and like it. He says this prompted him to think about the difference between Japanese culture and American culture, particularly around this concept of amai and the fact that you can't translate this word into English without a whole paragraph. And that we have, in effect, no equivalent notion, which speaks very much, I think, to the issue of choice, because in part of the element, one of the elements of amai is that you don't have to make choices, because your loved one, caretaker, whatever, can anticipate and knows your needs, and that this is part of the relationship. Okay. In the interest of efficiency, I will leave it there. On Barry's point, I wanted to just say this about benefit cost analysis.
Wait a minute, did you have a question?
No, I had no question. I just wanted to offer that comment. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, my only comment back, though, is that I started off my work on choice looking at cross-cultural differences. So I could later send you a copy of Rethinking the Value of Choice.
I guess if I have to have a question, it is how does that fit in to most of today, most of this panel, which was on class and so forth, and how does the element of culture enter in? But let me just briefly speak to Barry's and second his strictures on benefit cost analysis. For me, benefit cost analysis is crippled by three commitments that it makes. The first is to consequentialism, the second is to commensurability, and the third, to bring it back to my presentation this morning, is to a particular kind of cognition, what I called algorithmic knowledge, and having no place for experiential knowledge. So I'm glad to agree with you on that.
I think we'll treat that as a comment for which there is no comment in response.
I agree.
I think it's interesting to think about connecting everything that you've all said. As I think about it, it's easy to see what Nicole describes as a difference between, say, middle class and working class as a particular view of the person. That particular view of the person isn't held by everyone, but those with more stuff already. We have large commercial interests that want to promote a certain conception of who we are, and that conception is one that makes a lot of choices, and we give you a lot, and so you know we're doing what we promised and what you want. That's particularly appealing to those with more money, somewhat irrelevant from both parties' perspective to those with less money. There is also the fact that that law and economics as an approach that says the person is a kind of a dispositional actor and is acting according to his or her own autonomy, that carries a kind of ideological cover and explanation for the inequality that we otherwise might face, we might feel and want to deal with as a form of dissonance reduction. So that law and economics, which purports to be ideology-free and more or less just a tool, can have these consequences by reinforcing the interests of those with the most power and the most wealth, and prove that it's succeeding by giving people lots of choice, which is, I think, questionable. That's my attempt to summarize the four speakers one way, and I've taken us now 5 minutes beyond. So we'll start at 4:15 for the last session. It's the home stretch. Those of you who are blitzed, go get some coffee, and the bathrooms are downstairs. See you in a few minutes.